Pakeezah was released on the 4th of February 1972. 15 years in the making, it was surprising that the film was even completed. When released, the director and writer of the film, Kamal Amrohi, declared that he wrote this film for the leading actress alone, the great tragedy queen of Indian cinema, Meena Kumari. She was also his estranged wife. It is worth noting that the greatest fan of Pakeezah was none other than its lead actress, Meena Kumari herself. When it released, Pakeezah received mild and mixed responses. A review from the Times of India called Pakeezah a lavish waste, and a critic at Filmfare Magazine gave it a 1-star rating. The Urdu press, however, praised the film, calling it sensitive, historic, moving, and beautiful. A few weeks later, on the 31st of March 1972, Meena Kumari tragically died. Only in her late 30s, her death came as a shock to her family, the Bollywood film fraternity, and most of all her fans. As a result of this tragedy, many paid their respects to Meena Kumari by watching her last film, Pakeezah. Watching the film became a tribute to the great tragedienne of Indian cinema. And so it is that Meena Kumari and Pakeezah are intrinsically linked. Although Kamal Amrohi was the visionary and creator of Pakeezah, its iconic cult status rests heavily with the star of the film, Meena Kumari. She played a double role in it, as mother and daughter Tawaifs, Nargis and Sahibjan. Meena was conceptualized in the 1950s, and it shows. It was a film meant for the 1950s audience, and its delayed release resulted in it being an outlier in the company of its 1970s film contemporaries. Pakeezah is a woman-centric film. The male characters are secondary in it. True to the Tawaif trope in Indian cinema, the story of Nargis is one of tragedy. But the difference in Pakeezah lies in the storyline of her daughter, Sahibjan, who finds her happily ever after. The film presents two opposing deliberations. It romanticizes courtesan culture, while it also laments the debased status of the courtesan. These opposing positions, however, are reflective of the position of the Tawaif herself. She is glorified and celebrated as being an arbiter of beauty, culture, dance, and grace, yet she is shunned by mainstream society. Pakeezah is very often misunderstood as being a film with a radical take on the Tawaif character, because Sahibjan gets the guy in the end. But this is not the case. True to expectation, Sahibjan has to be a Tawaif who has a pure heart. Literally, she is renamed Pakeezah, or the Pure One, by her male love interest. Throughout the film, Sahibjan struggles with being a Tawaif. She dreams of the stranger who appreciates her for herself. In this patriarchal world, the only way to presumably attain respect is to be married, in order to become a part of mainstream society. Also, the narration of Pakeezah acts on behalf of the heroine to preserve her purity at all costs. Sahibjan exists in a patriarchal society, and her status and views reflect this reality. In this way, Pakeezah fits directly into the historical courtesan genre of Bombay cinema. However, what does in fact make Pakeezah a significant film is the fact that this film has a Tawaif protagonist. The protagonist was played by Meena Kumari, and the historical imagery of the film is centered beautifully on Tawaif culture. This historical imagery is centered on the mujra, or the musical and dance performance of the courtesan, on the mehfil, or gathering to watch her perform, on the mise-en-scene of the performance space, on the tehzeeb or manners of the courtesan and her patrons, and on a particular adha or grace and elegance of manner articulated through gesture, movement, performance, and expression of emotion. Pakeezah finds its strength in being a woman's film and a Muslim social film. It serves as a tribute to the Urdu language and represents the maker's nostalgia and romanticization for remnants of Lucknow Nawabi culture. It presents a dramatized version of the collision of the feudal world with the modern world. These are the elements that make Pakeezah a special film. The making of Pakeezah is as interesting as the finished product itself. In 2022, there were reports that a series on the making of Pakeezah was in production. According to reports, in a press statement, Saregama said they have collaborated with Bilal Amrohi, grandson of the celebrated filmmaker Kamal Amrohi, on a fictional series that will capture the intense love story between the director and Meena Kumari, his muse, that played out against the backdrop of the creation of this iconic film, Pakeezah. The film began as a project by Kamal Amrohi as a love letter to his wife Meena Kumari, but as their relationship became more strained, it became a project that he desperately needed his estranged wife to complete. The couple had an age gap of 16 years between them, and Meena Kumari was Kamal Amrohi's second wife. Another problem was that towards the end of production, Meena Kumari's health had deteriorated drastically. Throughout the 15 years of its making, Pakeezah's script was changed. Leading and supporting actors were replaced, and there were times that the director and leading actress were not even on speaking terms. There was even a time when Kamal Amrohi wanted to play the leading man in the film, and then a time when he considered replacing Meena Kumari. Meena Kumari designed her own costumes for this film. The songs and dances of Pakeezah are an especially important contribution to Indian cinema. They have become so iconic to the Bollywood audience that they continue to inspire Bollywood projects today.
And gave me the reference of Meena Kumari.
Okay.
So I tried to study that as best as I could in terms of voice and diction and how it was set in in an era. I mean, for me, that's the real jam. Like I love like listening to things and trying to work them in a certain way so that there's a certain rhythm in which if we listen to old movies, there's a certain way in which people speak. It's like recreating that time but with your mannerisms, with your voice.
In 2010, Harper's Bazaar India published a tribute to the film, with the actress Diya Mirza depicting Sahib Jahan in inspired moments from the film for a fashion spread.
To recreate Pakeezah in today's time, I mean, just going back, revisiting history. There's certain moments that Meena Kumari was captured in within the film that have just left this amazing imprint on our minds. What you would call Lucknowi or Hyderabadi garments and jewelry.
In this video essay, I will discuss the status of Pakeezah as a cult classic and it being a fascinating film filled with symbolism. I will also discuss Pakeezah as a woman's film with a specific character analysis of Sahib Jahan and talk about how the Netflix show Heeramandi had many Pakeezah-coded moments. In this video, I'm going to use the term tawayif and its closest English translation, courtesan, interchangeably, but it's important to remember that the term courtesan is very reductive. I'm not a fan of the term courtesan or dancing girl. These terms were flippantly used in articles, but it's not entirely correct and all-encompassing for the tawayif. Tawayifs were arbiters of culture throughout much of South Asian history. They have a very rich history, and it's only for ease of reference and broader understanding that I use the term courtesan in this video. So let's get into the video. Hello everyone, I'm Tess and welcome back to my YouTube channel where I talk about fashion, films and culture from the Indian subcontinent, and today we are going to be discussing an iconic film and one of my personal favorites, as you can see from my t-shirt, the iconic film Pakeezah. So I decided to do this video after I recently watched the Netflix show Heeramandi, and this was Sanjay Leela Bhansali's foray into a series and he delivered for me. I love the characters, I love the storyline, I love the beauty of the sets and the costumes. I loved the love story between Taj Tar and Alam. My favorite characters were actually Aditi Rao Haidari's character was number one for me, Bibo Jan, and Malika Jan. She was my second favorite character. She was a very strong character played by Manisha Koirala. Watching Heeramandi, which is a focus on the tawayifs of Heeramandi, I found myself watching it, felt like I was looking at so many references to and odes to and tributes to Mughal-e-Azam and Pakeezah. Sanjay Leela Bhansali has said in many interviews and continuously that Pakeezah and Mughal-e-Azam, he grew up watching these films and these films are really his inspiration. He loves the style of K. Asif and Kamal Amrohi, and you can see that in his work. And if you look at Heeramandi and Pakeezah, there are some instances where Heeramandi is very reminiscent of Pakeezah. The first was Lajjo and her storyline, where a very inebriated Lajjo is actually dancing at the wedding of her patron and love interest. And this is very Pakeezah coded when Sahib Jan dances at Salim's wedding. Another really interesting moment is Bibbo Jan's outfit in her kind of last dance was very reminiscent of Meena Kumari's styling as Sahib Jan, with this heavy jewelry and the focus purely on Bibbo Jan and the background dancers. Found that the setup of the kota, where there's this fountain in the front and then the patrons sit around this, very similar to the Gulabi Mahal of Pakeezah, I think. I mean, this is just thinking out loud and overthinking, but I love to kind of find these little references. Another really interesting part of Heeramandi is that the advice that Malika Jan gives Alam throughout this process of not falling in love and knowing her destiny as a Tawaf, very reminiscent of things that are said in Pakeezah. In Pakeezah, we had these really beautiful places for the Tawafs in their private spaces, and we see that in Heeramandi as well. Another really random but very interesting connection is that Kamal Amrohi's son's name is Tajdar, and of course Tajdar is a major character in Heeramandi. Heeramandi was definitely a necessary addition to the historical courtesan genre in Bollywood, and it definitely took this genre forward. I was happy to see that other creators on social media make this connection between watching Pakeezah, the film, and the series Heeramandi. The historical courtesan genre came back to life with this series. Pakeezah is a musical milestone for Bollywood films. Like I said before, the songs and dances of this film are just so iconic, and this TikTok creator discussed her songs in Heeramandi.
When the soundtrack came out, when I heard, I was listening to it and I didn't see the titles, and I heard Nazariya Ki Mari, and anyone who knows Pakeezah, the 1972 cult classic with Meena Kumari, directed and produced by Kamal Amrohi, Nazariya Ki Mari is one of the lost tumris of Pakeezah, and the fact that Sanjay Leela Bhansali has done a tribute to it in this album is. And then there's this song called Chaudhry Shab, which is the first time you hear Shreya Ghoshal's beautiful voice in this whole album. Full circle, man. Shreya Ghoshal was launched by Sanjay Leela Bhansali in, after Indian Idol, and then Devdas, Silsila-e Chahat Ka, blah blah blah. And the fact that she's still on this journey with him is beautiful. This song in particular, Chaudhry Shab, it has so many parallels to the song Chalte Chalte from Pakeezah as well. Chaudhry Shab means, the night of the 14th, so the full moon night. And in Chalte Chalte, there's a full moon which Meena Kumari dances at, looks at longingly, and even the beat. I don't know the technical terms for it musically. I'm quite emotional because it's a beautiful part of my childhood. One of my all-time favorite movies was Pakeezah, and this feels like it's a little tribute to it.
And this TikTok really reminded me of this article called The Lost Thumris of Pakeezah. Basically, the article sets out that Pakeezah was such a layered film that in the background of the film, there are thumris and ghazals that are unaccounted for in the official soundtrack list of Pakeezah. For example, they can be heard in scenes depicting the neighboring kotas where background tawafs are performing. These lost thumris create this very ambient sound in the film, and some of these compositions from the background can only be purchased from certain archives at this point. The article does set out that there are certain songs in Pakeezah that really seem to be lost forever. In preparation for this video, I read the book Pakeezah, An Ode to a Bygone World by M. Desai, and a few biographies on Meena Kumari. What was really clear from the outset is that the film Pakeezah and its progress in production was directly relative to the status of the relationship between the director Kamal Amrohi and his leading lady Meena Kumari. If they were on bad terms, the film stalled, whereas if they were on good terms, the film progressed. Kamal Amrohi was able to get funding for this film because Meena Kumari was the heroine of this film. She was so successful in this genre as the tragedy queen of Bollywood that she became fundamental to the film being made. In 1958, the Muhurat of the film happened, and this is an auspicious ceremony to mark and announce the start of work on a new film. Pakeezah was initially going to be in black and white. On the 25th of August 1968, Kamal Amrohi wrote wrote this letter to his now estranged wife, Meena Kumari, which is 10 years later from the Morat of the film. And he set out that
only Pakeezah's completion remains unsettled. You have made a condition that unless I give you a divorce, you will not complete Pakeezah. Even this, I know, can be untied. I will free you from your marital ties. After this, if you wish to help complete your Pakeezah, I would be most happy to do so. This is my request, that Pakeezah, on which the fortune of so many people depends, and which has the good wishes of so many people, should not be left uncompleted, if possible. You have better means. You have power. You have box office appeal, and most of all, Pakeezah needs you personally. Pakeezah, that is like a sinking ship, will reach ashore under your care.
So this was a very interesting letter that Kamal Amrohi wrote to his estranged wife. I mean, he's basically pleading with her to kind of complete this film. By the time he wrote this letter in 1968, Meena Kumari was in 1968 just as invested in this film as he was. Because during these years of making the film, her career saw many highs and lows, and by the end, she needed this film as well, as this was a leading heroine role, rather than she play a supporting sister or aunt in a film. So in a letter she wrote to her husband in 1969, she said,
"In regard to my working in Pakeezah, I have always been willing and clamoring to work. Pakeezah is my life dream, and it will be my greatest pleasure to see it completed. As for my remuneration, I am glad you have given me an opportunity to prove my regards and respect for you. I shall accept only 1 guinea as a token of goodwill for my entire work in Pakeezah."
Kamal Amrohi, as the writer, director of the film, traveled to various locations around India to find the perfect locations for his film. He waited for the perfect sunset for certain shots. He made sure the sets were extremely precise. There were many rewrites of the script. He was really a perfectionist. Kamal Amrohi had written most of the dialogue for the film Mughal-e-Azam. Some journalists claim that Kamal Amrohi actually wanted to outdo K. Asif's Mughal-e-Azam with Pakeezah. By November 1971, the entire film was in the can. During the 15 years of making Pakeezah, Meena Kumari went through many personal and professional challenges. Her greatest challenge, however, seemed to be her ongoing health concerns. There are parts of the film where she looks conspicuously different due to her ill health. Sometimes there was a body double brought in for her in scenes. Towards the end of the production, she could not perform the rigorous Kathak dances that were required of her, and it's well known that a body double dancer was used in the famous wedding dance of the film, and this dancer was named Padma Khanna. In Pakeezah, women really dominate the cast, and there are many scenes in the film where there is no man present at all. Patriarchy is the context in which these women function, but as the wives, they have made their own space and deal with men in a way they can take advantage. Also, it's very interesting to note that as the older Tawaif, Nawab Jan acts as a constant guide for Sahib Jan. She is the one who really shows strength and support for Sahib Jan when she confronts the men of Salim's family throughout the film. Nawab Jan is not intimidated by society who is deemed as respectable. In the film, Kamal Amrohi rightly presents the quarters in Delhi and Lucknow as opulent. It is the director's nostalgia and romanticization of Lucknow as a city that really influenced him and the style adopted in the film. In the article Afternoons in the Quarters of Lucknow, Professor V. Oldenburg set out that Lucknow Tawaifs were very powerful, alluring, bold, independent, and even wild. Oldenburg further set out that for the period 1858 to 1877, tax records in Lucknow reflected that dancing and singing girls, as they were flippantly called by the British, were in fact in the highest tax bracket, with the largest individual incomes of anybody in the city. Their names were listed on properties, orchards, manufacturing and retail establishments for food and other luxury items. Oldenburg said of the possessions of the Tawaifs as set out in British records, gold and silver ornaments studded with precious stones, embroidered cashmere wool and brocade shawls, bejeweled caps and shoes, silver, gold, jade and amber handled fly whisks, silver cutlery, jade goblets, plates, spittoons, hookahs, and silver utensils for serving and storing food and drink, and valuable furnishings. The value of this extraordinary plunder, these items were looted by the British, was conservatively estimated at nearly 4 crore rupees, £4 million sterling in 1857. Courtesans had established themselves as an influential group of women under the lavish patronage of the chief noblemen, merchants, and the official elite. It became fashionable for the noblemen to associate with some bizarre beauty, either for pleasure or for social distinction. It was not uncommon for the young sons of nobility to be sent to the best-known salons for instruction in etiquette, the art of conversation, appreciation of Urdu poetry, and even the finer points of lovemaking. They were the recognized preservers and performers of the high culture of the court and actively shaped the developments in Hindustani music and Kathak dance styles. So Meena Kumari as Sahib Jahan is really the romantic Tawayef in Pakeezah, whereas most of the other Tawayefs presented in Pakeezah are realist. She is a 1950s passive heroine who really suffers silently. This is a romance that was meant for the 1950s audience, where the leading heroine falls in love with a stranger who compliments her feat. It seemed that Meena Kumari really felt a kinship to the Tawayef story and her desire to simply love and be loved in return. The beauty of Meena Kumari in Pakeezah is timeless. This fountain scene was reportedly very uncomfortable for Meena Kumari, yet she looked so graceful in the scene, and this was recreated by Sanjay, Leela, Bhansali in Devdas with Madhuri Dixit. Meena Kumari as Sahib Jahan had 3 very popular songs, Inhi Logon Ne, Chalte Chalte and Thare Rayo, and these songs were reportedly filmed between 1957 and 1964. Ghulam Muhammad was the music director of the film, and he died 3 years before the film's completion. I think Naushad took over after his death. Ghulam Muhammad delivered the music to Kamal Amrohi soon after he signed on to the film. In Inhi Logon Ne, Sahib Jahan wears this pink Tawayef costume. In Thare Rayo, she's in a dazzling green outfit, and in Chalte Chalte, she's dressed in this orange outfit. Jewelry in these songs are particularly spectacular. In each of the songs, her demeanor really changes according to her character's feelings and what is happening in the film. In addition to the plot, I'm going to talk about the very interesting symbolism in this film, of which there is many. So I read an academic paper on 2 specific topics that are constantly considered in Pakeezah. When you watch the film, I suggest you look out for these topics. The first is death, and the second is the floating condition of the courtesans. The Tawayefs do not exist for mainstream society. They are shunned by society, and they exist in this microcosm of the floating world of the quarters and mehfils. Death and this floating condition of the courtesans is discussed during the dialogue, through imagery, and through song and dance in the film. Pakeezah follows the story of 2 generations of Tawayefs, Nargis and Sahib Jahan. Both these characters are played by Meena Kumari, and we can tell the difference between them through Nargis, who has blonde hair. Nargis is the mother of Sahib Jahan. Nargis dies after she is rejected by her lover's family. Being a Tawayef has more serious implications than merely being a profession for a class of women. It comes with really complex social culture in which the Tawayef lives a gendered identity. She carries this identity wherever she goes in society. At the start of the film, we are presumably in Delhi, but by the first decade of the 20th century, the anti-Norch movement by British missionaries and enthusiastically supported by Indian social reformers and nationalists had dealt a fatal blow to courtesan culture. It is therefore impossible to give precise temporal coordinates to the opening shot of the film. We then discover that Nargis's romantic interest is Shahabuddin, and he has promised to take Nargis away from the quarters. Shahabuddin's father, Hakim Saab, rejects Nargis because she is a Tawayef, and Nargis then runs away. She lives out her remaining days in a cemetery, and she writes a letter to Shahabuddin telling him that she has had a daughter and he is the father of her daughter. What was the significance of Nargis going to a cemetery. Basically, without being at the Tawayuf or being accepted by her lover's family, there is this intimation that there is no place for Nargis in mainstream society. Nargis concludes that she is a living corpse, and thus she goes to a cemetery to live out her days. This is a similar point of view that her daughter, Sahib Jan, later expresses in the film. This is also commentary on the status of the Tawayuf in society. The film then cuts to a scene at a merchant jewel shop. A local woman is trying to sell some jewelry, and Nawab Jan, who is the older sister of Nargis, is also at this shop. And there's a very interesting line in the scene that relates to something later in the film when the merchant or the jeweler discusses the purity or the impurity of the gold. And the merchant asks, how can there be anything impure in this? These gold coins are pure, there must be some minor fault. This dialogue is really connected to later in the film where Salim really renames Sahib Jan as Pakeezah, the one of pure heart or the pure one. Nawab Jan recognizes the jewelry being sold. It's a bangle, and she asks the woman where did she get this and to take her to the owner. She finds her deceased sister at the cemetery and a little daughter by her side. Nawab Jan takes the child, who is a girl, and tells the aide to sell whatever belongings Nargis had. 17 years later, Shahabuddin finally receives that note that Nargis wrote to him regarding their daughter. See Shahabuddin going to the quota to see Nawab Jan in search of his daughter. And Nawab Jan is very critical of him. You can tell from her attitude and demeanor. And she tells him that Sahib Jan is performing and he should just come back tomorrow. And we then see Sahib Jan for the first time performing in Hi Logone. This is a very significant and beautiful scene in this film. The song is very important to the film. Every inch in the background is filled with color, but above all with movement. The floating courtesan makes her first statement about her condition. There are no women on the ground floor. All of them stand, or rather dance, run, float on the second and third levels of buildings, a truly floating world. The scene in particular shows that the world of the Tawayufs, it's a world that exists away from mainstream society. The song Inhi Logone is also significant because the meaning of it is accusatory in nature. The Tawayuf accuses society of being the ones to take her dupatta, and her dupatta is associated with her honor. When Shahabuddin returns the next day to see his daughter, the house is deserted. They have left. Sahib Jan and Nawab Jan are traveling in an exclusive train compartment. It is here on this night that we meet Salim. So he enters their compartment and he sits down in the compartment, and Sahib Jan is asleep. Her face is visible, but he seems kind of focused on her feet. He picks up the book that she's reading, which is a collection of Ghalib's poems, and he writes a little note to Sahib Jan, which becomes very important in the story. And he kind of takes her little bookmark or feathered pen, and she wakes up and then reads his note, which talks about her beautiful feet. And in the letter, he tells her that she should not put her feet on the ground. It really plays into that floating imagery of the film. She is very taken by this letter because as a Tawayuf, her feet are very important to her. She is a dancer, but he sees her as something else, not as a Tawayuf. He sees her as a person in her mind. Nawab Jan and Sahib Jan then arrive in what we presume is Lucknow, and in order to shield Sahib Jan from Shahabuddin, she is taken to Gulabi Mahal, or the Pink Palace, where a quota is to be set up. It is at this point in the film that the film alludes to the financial independence of the Tawayufs. We also see in these scenes that another Tawayuf is recovering from some kind of medical situation. They don't overtly say what it is, but we could guess what it could be. More performances then happen at Gulabi Mahal, including Tare Rayo and Chalte Chalte. Very important to note that there is a difference in the depiction of the Delhi Kota and the Lucknow Gulabi Mahal Kota. So this reflects the distinction that Kamal Amrohi wants to draw between the Tawayuf and the Deradar. Tavaif lives in the bazaar and she sells her body less and her arts more, while the Deradar lives in a mansion usually maintained by a nobleman whose faithful mistress she is. When Sahibjan sings In Hi Logone, she is in the bazaar and her music caters to the clientele in that space. However, when she is in the Pink Palace, her music is more classical. Pakeezah is as much a tribute to the Urdu language as to the tehzeeb of Lucknowi culture. The lyrics of Pakeezah were written by lyricists who were also poets. Two dances at the Gulabi Mahal are very unlike many other more filmy mujra numbers. They are slower, and Sahibjan really distances herself from the male audience in them. We then meet Nawab Zafar Ali Khan, the Rais of Panipat, and he is interested in Sahibjan and possibly becoming her patron. We witness elements of Nawabi culture, especially in this scene, sends gifts to Sahibjan. One example is this very exquisite carpet, and by the reactions of the women to these gifts, we can tell that this is not something that they are particularly excited about. This is an expectation that the patron should act in this way if he is interested in one of the Tavaifs. Sahibjan grows more dissatisfied with her existence as a Tavaif as she focuses on the contents of the letter that she received from that stranger. She feels that there is someone out there who admires her just for being herself. We also see a very moving scene of an older woman demonstrating the art of dance. I loved this scene in particular. Another Tavaif, Biban, dissuades Sahibjan from having any romantic feelings because she is a Tavaif. Throughout Pakeezah, the train, as the site where Sahibjan first experienced love, represents her escape from the courtesan's lot. She fantasizes about the unknown lover who will someday take her away from her profession. This is one of the most recurring themes in the courtesan genre, the yearning of the courtesan for love, the love that brings freedom and escape. The Rais commands Sahibjan's presence on a pleasure boat, and it's clear that she is very uncomfortable with this arrangement. There is a very melodramatic sequence that happens. Miraculously, finds herself at the tent of the stranger that she thinks about. She meets him and she's very happy outside of the Tavaif world at this point. I think what's also really interesting is if you look at how out of place she kind of looks initially in this nature kind of surrounding with her clothing on, it's kind of this juxtaposition between the Kotas and where she is at present. Before she can spend more time with him, the fellow Tavaifs locate her. Miraculously, once again, Sahibjan returns to the Gulabi Mahal. She refuses to perform to perhaps teach Sahibjan a lesson. We presume that Goharjan, the woman in charge, the Tavaif in charge, has allowed the contractor to gain access to Sahibjan's private chambers. It's a very dramatic segment filled with symbolism in the form of cages, snakes, and water, and a storm. Another important note here, the caged bird is a very popular image for the Tavaif, representing the Tavaif in Indian cinema. At the start of the film, I think we see Sahibjan set a caged bird free, and then when she comes back to the quarter later in the film, we see the image of a bird, wings being clipped and put back into a cage again. Sahibjan then escapes this ordeal. She gets stuck on the train tracks. Train stops. She has escaped death once again, and miraculously her love interest finds her. So initially Sahibjan lies and tells her love interest Salim that she has no recollection of who she is, does confess that she is a Tavaif to him. He accepts her. There's also a sequence in the film where he is willing to fight for her honor, but this really weighs heavily on her. She feels immense shame. They are paraded in the street in this scene, and there's an angry mob shouting at her for being a Tavaif. After they are released from the police station, Salim and Sahibjan ascend some stairs to an open field where they meet an old man who will perform a marriage ceremony for them. The old man asks her name, and we hear the crowd as psychological sound shouting, "She's a whore." Salim intervenes and tells the old man her name, a new name. This is the moment where she is renamed Pakeezah, the pure one. Scene of the gold coins is brought back with Salim's declaration. She is the pure one, even with some minor dirt. By accepting her with her impurity, this becomes Salim's pure but also final gesture as a hero. Sahibjan does not accept. She gets very overwhelmed, the pressure of this entire moment, and she runs away. There's a very important scene here between Sahibjan and her cousin when she says the following: "Every Tavaif is a dead body. I'm a dead body and you too. This marketplace is a graveyard of women whose souls are dead, but the bodies remain alive. These mansions are our tombs in which the living coffins of we dead women are kept after being decorated. I'm a restless body of one such open tomb, which is lured by life again and again." Salim then announces his marriage, and in an act of cruelty, he requests that Sahibjan perform on his wedding day. Her performance is one of pain and sadness and anger, and she dances on broken glass. Her feet are now scarred, and this contrasts to the letter that Salim gave her at the start of their relationship, in which he advised her to keep her feet off the ground. Nawab Jan then challenges Shahabuddin to recognize that Sahibjan is his daughter. Chaos ensues with Shahabuddin being shot, but he finally recognizes Sahibjan as his daughter. Salim agrees to marry Sahibjan. Shahabuddin will receive the Bharat at the Kota in Delhi. We don't really know what happens to Salim's bride. Conclusion of the film is unimaginable from a historical perspective, and in this way Pakeezah stages this dreamscape of desire as set out in academic articles. It yearns for the world of the courtesan in its meticulous realization of performance idioms and its delirious imagining of the quarter. Yet it also seeks to realize the yearning of the courtesan to escape from that world. Most films of this historical courtesan genre, men and marriage are seen as the savior of the Thawaif, giving them acceptance into mainstream society through a perceived respectability. But if we as the audience are to critically analyze this, we realize that this outcome is fantasy, and the role of a wife is just that. It's another role. The Thawaif would not have complete autonomy or automatic esteem in simply assuming that role. Such a resolution of the story is reflective of the prevalent discourses in the then society and those of the writer-director's mind, who do not challenge the time-tested formula of the lead pair finally getting married. So the film really ends on a very interesting note. It's a focus on one of the other Kota girls left behind, as if to pose the question, is she the next Pakeezah? There is also a shot of a very concerned looking Nawab Jan who watches as the wedding procession leaves the Kota. Represents what we've been thinking and talking about in this video essay regarding Sahibjan and her future. Here are my final thoughts. If you've made it this far, I hope you do subscribe to this channel. Pakeezah is a tribute to womanhood as it struggles to retain a foothold in a patriarchal world. Pakeezah is also about Meena Kumari. Her heartbreaks, her hard work all her life to earn money for others by putting herself out as an actress from a tender age to her last breath is the subtext of this film. Her death soon after the release of Pakeezah forever sealed that connection. I want to end this video with some footage from the premiere of Pakeezah on the 4th of February 1972 in Mumbai. In this video we see Kamal Amrohi, the director, and we see the star Meena Kumari. And this premiere happened at the Maratha Mandir. There they are, Kamal Amrohi and Meena Kumari. And finally, I want to end with this ticket. This is a ticket to go and watch Pakeezah on the 30th of March 1972 at the 5:45 p.m. show at the Maratha Mandir. This is a Thursday. And why this ticket is kind of eerie to me, it's because on the next day, the 31st of March 1972, a Friday, Meena Kumari passed away.